You know, right at this very moment, there's a private concert happening inside your head. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and explore that incredible performance, the brain's inner orchestra.
So let me ask you something. Do you think of your brain as a kind of camera, just passively recording everything that happens around you? It's a pretty common idea, right? But the truth is, well, it's way more dynamic, and honestly, a whole lot cooler than that.
In fact, neuroscientists are now realizing it's much more useful to think of the brain as an orchestra. And you are the only person in the audience for its totally unique, one-of-a-kind performance. Every single thing you see, hear, and feel, it's all part of this incredible symphony being composed just for you in real time.
Okay, so if the brain is an orchestra, then what sheet music is it playing from? Where does the music come from? Let's start right there by talking about interpreting the world's score. To really get this, we have to touch on our really key scientific idea. It's called the efficient coding hypothesis. I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the concept behind it is pretty revolutionary. It basically says that our senses are fine-tuned to represent the things we see and hear most often in our world. So what does that mean in our orchestra metaphor? Well, it means the brain's orchestra becomes an absolute virtuoso at playing the music it hears all the time. It gets incredibly good at processing the patterns that are common and predictable in your world. And this is how the orchestra is constantly tuning itself. It learns from recurring patterns, it zeroes in on what's predictable, and its goal is always to capture the most information possible using the least amount of energy. It's all about being ruthlessly efficient. So, who are the actual musicians in this orchestra? Well, let's zoom in on the neurons themselves and see how they actually play their music. You see, to truly understand this incredibly complex music, neuroscientists had a huge challenge. They couldn't just listen in. They had to actually learn the fundamental language of the brain itself. And the Rosetta Stone they use for this is something called an encoding model. You can just think of these as super powerful digital translators. They take a stimulus from the outside world, like a picture or a sound, and they map it directly to the specific pattern of brain activity it creates. Here's a really simple way to think about how these models work. First, you have an input. Let's say it's the song of a bird. Then, you measure the brain's electrical response to that song. The model, that's the magic translator in the middle. It's the piece of the puzzle that connects that specific song to that specific pattern of neurons firing. But here's the thing. These models showed us something absolutely critical. Knowing which neurons are firing is only half the story. The real music isn't just in the notes themselves, but in the rhythm, the timing of how they're played. So this gives us two layers to the music. On one hand, you've got the spatial patterns. That's which neurons are firing. Think of it as which instruments are playing. But just as important, you have the temporal patterns. That's when they are firing, the rhythm and the tempo. You absolutely need both to hear the full piece. So who's leading this whole shebang? Well, as it turns out, the brain isn't just the orchestra, it's also the conductor, managing the entire performance second by second. Now, a key job for this conductor is something called sensory adaptation. Your perception of the world is always being shaped by what you just experienced. The classic example, you know how your eyes have to adjust when you walk from a bright space into a dark room? That's your brain conducting an adjustment right there. So through this process of adaptation, the brain is constantly retuning the orchestra. When you walk into that dark room, it's like the conductor is telling the violins to play a little softer or the percussion to quiet down. It's this dynamic, non-stop process of adjustment. But it gets even more amazing than that. The conductor also handles what we call context-dependent processing. This is where the brain actively changes how it processes information based on what's happening right now. Think about it like a real conductor in a concert hall. They might tell the brass section to play louder during a dramatic moment or the woodwinds to be softer during a quiet passage. Your brain does the exact same thing, deciding which of your senses need to be turned up or turned down based on what's most important in that moment. Of course, we don't experience the world through just one sense at a time, do we? So now let's get to the grand finale and explore how our perception isn't just one instrument, but a full multi-sensory symphony. Your brain is always busy, working behind the scenes to integrate information from all your different senses, your sight, your hearing, your touch, and it weaves them all together into a single unified experience.
It happens so seamlessly you don't even notice it. You just experience one coherent reality.
Have you ever watched a ventriloquist act and just been amazed at how the sound really seems to be coming from the puppet's mouth, even when you know logically that it's the person speaking? Well, that little illusion is a perfect example of your brain's multi-sensory symphony in action. So here's the puzzle your brain has to solve in that moment. It's getting conflicting data. Your eyes are giving it very precise information. The puppet's mouth is moving right here. But your ears are giving much more ambiguous information. The sound is coming from somewhere over there. So what's a brain to do?
It makes a judgment call. Your brain trusts the more reliable, more precise information, which in this case is coming from your eyes. And so it actively builds a reality that makes the most sense. It creates a single, cohesive story where, yep, the puppet is the one talking.
So what do we learn about this masterpiece happening in your head? Well, first, it's an active interpreter of the world, not just a passive recorder. Second, it's constantly learning and adapting based on both your past experiences and your current context. And finally, it blends all of your senses together into that one seamless symphony that you call reality.
Which really just brings us to one final thought. If your brain is this incredible dynamic orchestra, what symphony is it composing for you right at this very moment?